Hello, friends, and welcome back to Retro Unscripted. My name is Peter, and after a bit of an absence, I am very happy that you have come back to check out this latest episode. I do apologize for being away for a while. I've been down with a cold slash flu slash plague, whatever it is you want to call it, that always seems to hit me around this time of year. So my voice is still not 100%. I'm hoping that I don't squeak and squeal as we move on, but I'm glad that you could join us today. As you can see behind me on the GXTV, I have Sinister running. Sinister was just one of a handful of coin ops located at a place called Ivory Billiards, which was within walking distance of my maternal grandmother's house. When I was about 10 years old or so, in order to get the arcade experience when I couldn't go to the mall, this pool hall was the only place that I could go. And inside the pool hall, granted I couldn't play pool to save my life, but they had some really cool coin ops in there, and as long as I had some quarters, granted that's where allowance came from, or where birthday money came from, but I would go and I would spend time in there during the mid and late afternoon between the time that school would get out till the time I had to return home for dinner. So Sinister was one of the games that was located in this pool hall, and it was, of course, dimly lit. During the mid and late afternoon, there really weren't a lot of people there. There were a few kids like myself, maybe a couple of younger adults, but it was relatively quiet. So, of course, having the attract mode on and hearing Sinister yelling at you across the room was an experience that kind of scared the hell out of me when I was a kid. I didn't play the game a lot, mainly because money was tough to come by and because I sucked at the game. As you can see, the game's pretty frenetic. There's a lot of shooting that goes on, and of course the little worker drones are collecting pieces to be able to build the Sinister machine, which basically exists to eat you and kill you. And I always had a difficult time because the game moves so fast with being able to shoot down enemies and take down the Sinister as quickly as I could. I always wound up moving too fast and would wind up running into a worker drone or running into an asteroid or a bullet and would wind up dying before very long. Typically, a quarter or a credit for a Sinister would last me about 45 seconds, maybe a minute if I was having a really good run. Now when I play this is the Midway Arcade Treasures version of it that's running on the PlayStation 2 behind me. Now when I play, I can double that. I can sometimes get to 2 or 2.5 minutes when playing. I can usually take out one of the Sinisters, maybe two if I'm lucky. And it's still fun to play because of the memories that it brings back. See, at that time, when I was 10, we had an Atari 2600 or an Atari VCS at my maternal grandmother's house, as well as an Apple IIe. But these really paled in comparison to actually playing the arcade machines themselves. The graphics capability and the voice capability were obviously much more powerful in arcades or on coin-op machines than they were playing on the Atari 2600 at home. So being able to walk back and forth between my grandmother's house and this pool hall was a really big deal. Now, granted, I would never do it after dinner because that's when all of the adults would come to play pool, and I kind of got looked down on. Of course, being a 10, 11-year-old kid, that tended to happen. But that was just Sinister was just one of the games that was there. There were a couple of other games that were pretty notable as well. They had an original Donkey Kong coin op as well as the Donkey Kong Jr. coin op. Both games, of course, I stunk at. There was also a Tutankhamun coin op from Stern, which Konami now owns. You can play that in Game Room for the Xbox 360 and PC. That's another game that was a big quarter eater. It sounded cool. I liked the Egyptian motif of the game, but I barely got through the first level and then would die. Die. And it really wasn't worth spending my money on. There was also a pole position machine, which I gradually got better at the more I played, to the point where I could finish a race with a little bit of time left to spare. Never good enough to really get within the top 10 on the leaderboards, but still a pretty neat achievement for someone who was a little kid. There was also a Sidearms coin op. I debated about putting that on the big screen behind me, but Sidearms from Capcom was another shooter, like a mech shooter, which was kind of cool, had its own unique style. I was never a big fan of it, either in the arcade or on the TurboGrafx 16. I'll sometimes play it on Capcom Classics Collection discs here and there, but not very often. And then, and I'm very happy that I got this recently, there was this guy. Mr. Do, the coin op was awesome, and still is, and I'll talk about the SNES version in a moment. Mr. Do is one of the few arcade games where you could actually win a free game when certain conditions were met. If you drop certain apples and diamond happens to fall out, if you collect it, you actually got a free game out of the deal along with 8,000 points, which were a lot back then. So knowing that chance of a free game always existed, it was something that I always kept coming back to, even though I wasn't really tremendous at it. I could usually get to about stage 3 or 4 before I died, but every so often that diamond would come out and I would collect it. And I would be able to get a free game out of the deal, and being able to play 2 games for a quarter instead of 1 was kind of a cool catch. Now, the home version of Mr. Do for the SNES plays very similarly to the arcade. Runs just about as well 85% of the time, although when too many apples fall or when there are too many monsters on the screen at once, there is a little bit of slowdown that will come into play. It doesn't kill the game by any stretch, but it certainly makes you scratch your head a little bit as far as to why the emulation tends to chug a little bit. Unfortunately, there were no other home conversions of the game after this, so there weren't any arcade compilation discs that had universal games such as Mr. Do on there. And a game like Mr. Do's Castle, which I went on to play at a small campground in a rec room there, was even tougher to find. I believe ColecoVision and maybe some personal computers had a version of Mr. Do's Castle, and that was it. We never saw that game again. And then there's Mr. Do's Wild Ride, which I personally haven't played, but several of my my Twitter friends and YouTube video making friends that I know have talked about this game and say that they like it. I haven't played it. I'm going to need to look it up on YouTube, but we never saw that either, and that's kind of a shame. But it's very interesting as I look back now, and that was, let's see, I was 10, so that's 82, so wow, that's 32 years ago. But anyway, 32 years ago, that's where I got my arcade goodness from. Obviously, being that age, the mall was too far to walk. We weren't exactly a well-to-do family, of course, because we were living with my maternal grandmother, so we weren't doing all that well. So the only way that I was going to get any real arcade game time with any regularity was to visit this pool hall, which I'm very grateful for. It turns out I went back to that pool hall recently within the last few months, and all the arcade games are gone, but they do have fond memories. I was talking to the new staff. The older owners, unfortunately, had passed on some time ago, but they remember when the arcade games were there, and they certainly remembered as we were talking back and forth about groups of kids that would come in and would play, and how that was a neat offshoot of their business at the time. And it harkens back to when you could find arcade games almost anywhere. Pool halls, of course, made sense. You could also find them at bowling alleys, but you could also find them in convenience stores like 7-Elevens. And of course, there was a blog post that I made not too long ago talking about finding arcade games or having arcade games in a local convenience store when I lived in Greenfield, Massachusetts. That was another big deal. You could find arcade games almost anywhere you went. You really didn't have to walk that far, and my case was a perfect example of that. I didn't have a main line arcade anywhere near my house, but having that pool hall nearby certainly helped to keep my Twitch habit happy until I could actually get to the mall when my mom or my grandmother decided to go, and I could get tokens instead of quarters and play to my heart's content. So that's what I want to talk about in this episode. Again, I am sorry if my voice isn't quite the way it should be, or if I'm not quite as clear or cohesive as I usually am. Again, it's all the sinus stuff up here. I do want to send a shout out to all of you who have subscribed to the channel and who have been watching. I know that we eclipsed 80 subscribers not too long ago, which is a fantastic deal to me. The fact that 80 people are subscribing to the channel for something that I set out just to have fun doing certainly means a lot to me, and I really do appreciate that. And hopefully now that my health is starting to come back into form, I'll be making videos a little bit more often and should be back to the 2 video a week schedule before long. So until the next time, friends, have a great rest of your week, and I will see you on the next Retro Unscripted. Take care.